Today, I'm going to show you how to chart like a pro, specifically when it comes to Bitcoin and the crypto mining sector. First, if you don't mind, smashing that like button, click and subscribe if you haven't. Also, turning on those post notifications, I'd greatly appreciate it. When it comes to charting, I want to be as simple and to the point as possible. I don't want to overcomplicate things. I don't want a million lines and tools and indicators cluttering my chart. I promise you, all you need is the price action. Now, what we want to do is focus on areas in which the price is strong and then versus when it's weak. Now, the only thing that I'm looking for when I start is points of significance or directional change. So when we go all the way back, right, we have to observe where was the top, right? Here at 69,000, right, was the top, right? And this again is what we call all-time high, right? So we're not focused on this anymore, but we have to acknowledge where the top is. Now, pretty much from there, it's just a complete markdown all the way to 17,000. I mean, this gets crushed. Consolidates, gets knocked down. Consolidates, gets knocked down, right? Just very distributive. Now we have our break in the trend, right? This is our break of the downtrend. It comes from 69 all the way down here fast to 17,000. Okay, so we have to now mark that line, as you could see, a 17,638. Okay, so that's again important for us to mark. At least we'll say for right now, this is our temporary B for bottom. Okay, so this is pretty much June, July, right? If we're looking at the time frame here. Now, when we go back to, let's call it mid-August, August, September here on the timeline 2 months later, right? We're testing this range, which is very hot. So we test this range, it gets, again, knifed down. We test it again twice, it gets pushed down 3 times, it gets pushed down even lower than when that previous support was. Okay, so now we have a few things mapped out. We have our support temporarily, and then we have our resistance temporarily, right? Here's a bottom. It bounced about, just over 8,000 points here within 2 months, right? From 17 all the way up to 25.2. And then the resistance here from 25.2 all the way down here to about, 15 and change. Okay, so this was a big drop, right? This fell, right, about 10,000 here. Okay, and that again was from August, September, all the way down to November, December. Right, just so again, if you want to see that time frame and what makes sense in your head. So we have a lot of volatility here, but we have a decent range that we're working with. Right now, I think it's clear we have the bottom that's mapped out really well. Okay, it starts to really melt up. But again, what we noticed in the past is now relevant again. So, like we just mentioned, right? The first time it touched here, it got ripped down. The second time, ripped down. Third time, went low, and then again made a lower low. Now, that was again August, September. We're looking at next year, February, right? So, got pushed down once, pushed down twice, pushed down 3 times. This is a point of significance, right? So, clearly, it's not just once, it's now twice. So, this is not only a line of resistance, this is a supply zone here, which is showing you over a multi-month period when the price gets to 24,200 and above, there are people selling stock trying to push it lower. And then I'm sure on the flip side, there are people turning around, selling stock and putting bids in, all at these ranges here to reaccumulate lower before again pushing it higher, which is ultimately what we see. But still, we have to map out this pink or purple range because we saw, right, going back from July of 22, where it rejected 3 times here, and then it ends up being relevant again back in February and then March of that next year. So very important. Okay, so now again, we keep that range the same. And what's very interesting is it melts all the way up, right? Goes all the way to a high here, and then ends up retesting that range that was previously resistance, now as support. Now, this is textbook here in terms of playing breakouts, right? We want to wait for the breakout and the retest of that previous zone, which is exactly what we see. So that's why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin here, and we've been tracking it because this previous line or this previous zone in which it struggled for a long time, right? Nearly a year, now finally breaks out and uses, again, resistance as support or the ceiling as a new floor. And then it bounces and makes a new high, and then retests this same range again and bounces, tests it again and bounces, and ultimately starts to melt up. So again, this area or the supply zone now became a demand zone. This resistance now became support, right? It flip-flopped, and that happens a lot. This is very, very bullish. Now, ultimately, right, we just look for the break, right? As it got the break, it really started to melt up. And pretty much the break, I think, would be somewhere from like this range, right? If we were to map out, historically where it's got really marked down, that would probably be like my supply zone. Okay. And then it just got absolutely out of control. It accelerated and again melted up here. So now from this point, right, when we're going from, let's say, October all the way up to December, right, it's pretty difficult to try and map out where it's going to go, right? It's just ripping up, right? I'm not trying to guess when it's going to fall or when it's going to pull back, right? We could have done this a million times where we put the daily close there, the daily high, but what's the point of mapping it out when it's just ripping, right? It just keeps going higher and higher and higher. So let it ride, let it chill. And I tell this to people all the time. Sometimes you just have to kick your feet back and observe, right? It melts, fizzes all the way up fast, right? 26, 27,000, all the way to 36, 37,000 fast. This is like another 10K rip, super, super fast. Again, look at the time frame, right? October to the end of November here, very fast. And then still goes all the way up here to nearly 43, 44,000. So monster rip, 15, 20,000 point move. And then now it starts to pull back. From here, we can now gauge, okay, here is our temporary support. Finally, after months, here is our bottom, right? And again, pretty much just observing it from there. So it touches it, it bounces, touches it, it bounces, touches it, bounce, right? You get the trend. So it's pretty much doing the same thing here. And then finally, oh, we get that break. But again, it's a false break, it's a bear trap, and then it ends up again really starting to melt. So this is now getting out of that distributive sort of feel and look. Now we're starting a whole new phase of accumulation at 17, 18,000, all the way up to 20, 30s, and now in the 40s. So from here, right, we just want to zoom in a little bit, right? This line that, again, sort of acted as a barrier. It's not really resistance, but, sort of this range here, if we want to say, was tough to get above and now sort of broke out and retested it again. Very similar to what we just saw, before it took this leg up, right? It sort of, touched and touched and touched and touched. And finally, it got the break, right? Ripped up, made that new high, and then ended up coming right back down and retesting before bouncing. So again, very, very textbook the way it trades, which is interesting. You just have to be patient. Right? That's all it is. So we map out our points of significance. Right here was our first bottom. Right, the low here was 40,222. Right, where it really stopped, and then it ripped all the way up to almost 49,000 fast. Right, this is from the last or second week in December or it's actually one full month. Right, December 11th to January. So in one month, again, this went from 40 all the way almost to 49,000. So this is fast, almost 9,000 point move. Just call it 9,000 point move in one month. So this was definitely our bottom and never broke that until it touched really here, which again was the 22nd of January. Very short-lived, right? 3, 4 days, and then it popped right back. So if I wanted to, right, what I can do is I could sort of draw out like this, for example, right? Something like that. Maybe that would make sense. Okay. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. Now, I'm not really focused on much here besides trying to understand where it could potentially go, right? And I think it would probably be best to go on the weekly here, right? When we look at where Bitcoin is, right, and we go all the way back, it hasn't been trading at these levels since, the end of December of 21. So we get above 52,000, this little barrier of resistance here, as you can see, I think it's going to melt all the way up fast. I mean, we can get to 55, 57, like very quick, 60 will fall. And then again, pretty much when we're there, right? If we zoom all the way out, like on the weekly, like this is like all-time high, right? Sometimes people don't zoom out and realize like this is all-time high. Like we are not that far from, getting there. We're very close relative on the chart. And I mean, there's a lot of empty space, right? It is not traded in this range in quite some time. So again, going to be very interesting. I think when it breaks, it's just going to absolutely melt. And then when we look at the month, right, we could see the same thing. Look at how nasty this monthly chart is. I mean, if we clear this out for a second, just so you could visually see it, I mean, look at how pretty that looks. I mean, it's really amazing. Look at the monthly. So the more we zoom out, the more picture it starts to paint, and get a good understanding of where things are headed. Okay, the big monthly candle, of course, here would be the close here at 61. 299, right? This is like the big dog. Like we break that, we're gonna absolutely explode. Okay, so one step at a time, but again, Bitcoin looks absolutely fantastic. I think 52 comes fast. Next would be probably 55, 57. From there, 60, 61, it breaks that, easily going to all-time highs and really starting to melt faces. So really, really pretty. Let's move on from this though. We talked a lot about Bitcoin here. I want to talk about TeraWulf. Again, very interesting the way that this one plays out. Again, just looking back to where it was, and again showing you those levels, right? So I know a lot of people, they roll their eyes and they say, "Oh, the stock's shorted and it's manipulated, it's all this stuff." Well, yes, but again, let's sort of focus on the things that we can control, right? We're not going to be able to control the outside influences. Let's just try and again gauge it. So as again, same thing here, right? We want to establish a bottom in the top, right? That's very important, right? Here clearly is a bottom, here clearly is a top. And the reason why that's clear is because that fell 50% from this range, right? Very fast, right? This was pretty much January, took about maybe 2.5, 3 weeks, and the stock lost 50% of its market cap. Okay. This was $4, right? Coming all the way down here to around 90 cents. So $4 to 90 cents. Again, you do the math. That's what, 80% down, 75, 80% down. So clearly, these are, again, reversal points, points of significance, directional changes, whatever you want to call them. Now, as we go up, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to observe times in which the stock was weak or it struggled, right? And does it match with any of my Fibonacci retracements? Now, I did find one point of resistance, which was right at this $2 level. Now, the reason why is we see this candle here, right? If I sort of draw it out like this, these two candles, very interesting, right? It touches this line nearly to the penny. As we could see, the high here is 199. Let's again show you where I'm looking at right up here, right? The high here is 199, the line is 197, right? And then it rejects all the way down, closes 181. The next day it jumps up to 216, closes 198, which again was 1 penny off. So both times throughout these two trading days, the bulls ripped the price all the way up and bears tried at the end of the day to smack it back down. And again, it gapped up, made a higher high, higher low, and then again, end of the day, they try to rip it down and close it below $2. Now, I don't know if it's a short trigger or a psychological value, whatever it might be, but $2 is definitely a level that I like to follow. Okay. Now, obviously, it breaks out, right? There's not like a massive, massive amount of correlation here because pretty much the day after, a couple days after, it surged all the way up another full point. So we'll just keep it sort of in the back of our heads. Now, again, right, our next point of significance, right, of course, could be somewhere, in this area where it struggled. I would say that's another area, 220, you can look for definitely. And then the top here being 321, 318, right, somewhere in that range, 315, 320, if you want to go by 5 cents, that's cool. Okay, now we have to observe the same thing on the way down, right? As it's starting to come down, right? It hits a bottom, pops, tries to reverse again and go for that big attempt at the high of the run and gets smacked right here. Okay, so there, right? Again, 243, right? In that level, 245 is going to be a significant number. Now, when we look here, the high here is 246, off by 3 cents, right? And again, closes like right at the low. So this was nasty. I mean, this was like, pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, pretty much a whole week's worth of trading. Just boom, gave it all back in one day. Okay, and then again, pretty much if we want to go from there, right, we get rid of this arrow. Next line, I would say right here is another higher low or temporary bottom. So we have again our chart low. And then again, this would be the higher low. So we could do number two, higher low two. Now, when we go back up, right, as we officially have our bottom, we have to look back at 1, 2, 3, and then 4, right? So here, right, what do we notice? Right, again, looking at the high. The high here was 202. The close was 188. So again, very interesting, very similar to what we saw in the past here, right? Where it didn't want to close above, but it wicked above, right? So it rejected off that level the same way how it did at number one. Okay. So interesting, right? How we see the rejection here, and then that's what we notice in the future. Okay. Now we move on, right? We look at number two, right? We really didn't have any sort of turbulence at number two, so we could pretty much get rid of that 220 resistance, right? We didn't see anything there. Now, as we go all the way up, what do we notice, right? Number four, oh, same exact struggle, right? The high 246, the close 192, the high 248, the close 238, which again, 5 cents off from our line. And now when we look at today, right? Same thing, pretty much using that $2 level that we just mentioned here. That wasn't super significant. It's closing below two. So I would say for right now, when we look at TeraWulf without overcomplicating things, right? I'm trying to make it very bare bones, very simple, and I'm over explaining everything intentionally. I think the best thing to do is just go level by level. So I find that, this is definitely a point of significance, and then this is. So on the way up here, right, as long as we continue our trend and we don't, break this previous low and trade down there, I think we're going to be in a good position. The next level, right, is pretty much what we just saw here. So this purple line is my main focus, and the next would be 321. Okay, but as you could see, right, it's really interesting how in the past, right, it struggles here for a little bit and it struggles there and pulls back. It struggles here and then again struggles there, right? These lines are not perfect. They're not going to be one to one. They're not going to be the exact penny, but they're pretty darn close. Okay. So very interesting stuff here on Wolf. Obviously, right, we could zoom all the way out and see the big picture, which again could be, $10 and $15, but pretty much going all the way back to, May of 22, we haven't traded above $455, so I'm not going to look at those ranges until they're relevant. As of right now, the most relevant lines I think is going to be 240, 250 range, 318, 320, and then pretty much the top here at $4. So $4, let's say 320, right? And then again, let's call it 250. Okay. 250, 320, 4 is the next big checklist here for Wolf. Very short, very simple. And we gave you the exact reason why. And then again, Riot, right? And again, all we did was we just used the same exact principles we did before with Riot, right? We saw it came all the way down, right? This was the accumulation phase after getting beat down here. Pretty much call this, end of August, September, all the way to where it starts to make that move, end of, November, December. So you had about, let's say 4 or 5 months, give or take, to accumulate. Pretty much nothing above 12, $13, nothing below, 859. And then again, it goes up higher, retest this demand zone down here where we saw previously. And again, this was August, September, all the way to November, and now pretty much goes, January, February of this year. So it's definitely been a long range here, retesting, and then again, boom, it pops. Now, the same principles apply with Riot as it would Mara, Bitcoin, or anything like that, right? The key levels to me are important, right? I like to look at the all-time high daily close, weekly close, monthly close, right? And pretty much go from there. Now, of this little sequence here, going all the way back to pretty much January here, the highest close that we saw was 1601. So we call it 16 here. And again, it's interesting that the day before it closed 1592, right? So very, very close in terms of that previous daily high of the sequence, and looking to break that. The next, of course, would be probably like 1702, 1778, and then the highest daily close of this entire play out here would be 1862, which is the top. So 1862 is the big break here, what we really want to see. Then from there, I'm sure it'll start to surge, right? Of course, if Bitcoin is moving, it's, mid upper 50s or maybe even testing 60s in the next month or two, we'll be in a much different position. But overall, the sector looks great. That's why I did the video. I know it's probably really lengthy, so again, forgive me for the lengthy video. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, click and subscribe, and then also, if you don't mind sharing this video, I would greatly appreciate it. We're trying to give you more educational stuff like this and technical breakdowns. Again, if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments section below. Share it with anyone that likes to trade or again, focus on the crypto sector. Again, guys, have a fantastic day. Enjoy it. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.